Hello everybody, Shin Awesome Gamer for and I'm gonna do 2013 bracket picks. So let's get started. We're gonna start with the Midwest corner of the screen. So first up we have Louisville versus Liberty / NCA&T. I picked Louisville. Colorado State versus Missouri. I picked Missouri. Oklahoma State versus Oregon. I have a slight upset, and I picked Oregon. St. Louis versus New Mexico State. I picked St. Louis. Memphis versus Middleton / St. Mary's. I picked Memphis. Michigan State versus Vampire Rio. I picked Michigan State. Creighton versus Cincinnati. I picked Cincinnati. Duke versus Albany. I picked Duke. Now we're gonna go on to the next round. So next round, we're still in the Midwest. Louisville versus Missouri. I picked Louisville. Oregon versus St. Louis. I picked Oregon. Memphis versus Michigan State. I picked Michigan State. Cincinnati versus Duke. I picked Duke. Gonzaga versus Pittsburgh. I picked Pittsburgh. Upset. Wisconsin versus Kansas State. I picked Wisconsin. Upset. Arizona versus Harvard. I picked Arizona. Iowa State versus Ohio State. Sorry, wrong one. Ignore that. Ignore all of that. Dang it. So let's go back up to Midwest. Louisville versus Oregon. I picked Louisville. Michigan State versus Duke. I picked Duke. And then I picked Louisville versus Duke. I picked Duke. So yeah, Duke is in the Final Four. Let's move on to our now start the seating while I move this paper around a bit. Alright, now we're on the West category. So in the West category, we have Gonzaga versus Southern U. Gonzaga. Pittsburgh versus Wichita State. I picked Pittsburgh. Wisconsin versus Ole Miss. I picked Wisconsin. Kansas State versus Boise State / La Salle. I picked Kansas State. Arizona versus Belmont. I picked Arizona. New Mexico versus Harvard. I picked Harvard. Upset. Notre Dame versus Iowa State. I picked Iowa State. Upset. Ohio State versus Iona. I picked Ohio State. Gonzaga versus Pittsburgh. I picked Pittsburgh. Wisconsin versus Kansas State. Oh, by the way, I'm on the next round. Kansas State. I put Wisconsin. Arizona versus Harvard. I put Arizona. Iowa State versus Ohio State. I put Ohio State. Moving on to the next round, Pittsburgh versus Wisconsin. I put Wisconsin. Arizona versus Ohio State. I put Ohio State. And with Wisconsin versus Ohio State, I put Ohio State, putting it in the Final Four. Next is the South bracket. So in the South bracket, we have Kansas versus Western Cal. I put Kansas. North Carolina versus Villanova. I put Villanova. Slight upset. VCU versus Akron. I put VCU. Michigan versus South Dakota State. I put Michigan. UCLA versus Minnesota. I put Minnesota. Upset. Florida versus Northwestern State. I put Florida. San Diego versus Oklahoma. I put Oklahoma. Upset. Georgetown versus Florida Gulf Coast. Put Georgetown. And moving into the next round, Kansas versus Villanova. I put Kansas. VCU versus Michigan. I put Michigan. Minnesota versus Florida. I put Florida. Oklahoma versus Georgetown. I put Georgetown. Moving on to the next round, Kansas versus Michigan. I put Kansas. Florida versus Georgetown. I put Florida. Upset. And in the And in the next round, Kansas versus Florida, and I put Florida. So they are in the Final Four. We're on to our last section. Indiana versus, what does that say? LIU Brooklyn / JMU. Sorry for mispronunciations. NC State versus Temple. I picked Temple. Slight upset. UNLV versus California. I picked California. Upset. But since I live in California, I have to pick it. Syracuse versus Montana. Syracuse. Butler versus Bucknell. I picked Butler. Marquette versus Davidson. I picked Marquette. Illinois versus Colorado. I put Illinois. Miami versus Pacific. I put Miami. And in the next round, Indiana versus Temple, I put Indiana. California versus Syracuse, I put Syracuse. Butler versus Marquette, I put Marquette. Illinois versus Miami, I got Miami. Moving on to the next round, Indiana versus Syracuse, I got Syracuse. Marquette versus Miami, I got Miami. And moving on to the next round, Syracuse versus Miami, I got Syracuse. So, my final four is Duke, Ohio State, Florida, and Syracuse. So, drumroll. In Duke versus Ohio State, I put Duke. In Florida versus Syracuse, I put Florida. And in the final for the national championship, Duke versus Florida, I put Butter. I'm just kidding. I put Duke. So yeah, I actually wrote the bracket like 10 minutes ago. So yeah, guys, don't try and use this bracket. I was mainly guessing because I don't really watch it. So yeah, guys, tell me what your bracket was and who you picked for the winner below. Now, one quick story. I went downstairs to my dad, right? I'm like, I'm going to favor UConn in this 2013 bracket. And he said, UConn isn't even in the March Madness, so you're not going to have that good a chance of winning. So, yeah. So, if you were wondering what team I actually favor, I favor Rutgers, because I used to live in New Jersey, and I love Rutgers. But they are not in this either. So, yeah. Comment below who you want to win. And also comment who you're favoring. I was favoring in this. I was favoring. I have to say, California for one round, Syracuse for a couple rounds, Duke and Louisville. Those were the ones I was kind of favoring, but I didn't always make them win. So yeah, guys. Comment below all that stuff, and remember to like this video. I'm gonna do a new series, and the more likes I get on that series, well, budger. And subscribe, and I will subscribe to you. Goodbye. Goodbye.